The black plastic phone slipped from the side pocket of the leather golf bag and smacked against the hardwood floor. The screen lit up. One new message. The contact name simply read, Mechanic. The text preview glowed against the dark carpet. She signs the trust papers on Friday. Then the money is ours. Baby. My chest tightened. I picked up the device. It was unlocked. I opened the messaging app. The chat background behind the text bubbles was a photo. A very clear, undeniable photo of my husband kissing my younger sister on a beach we visited last summer. My throat closed completely. I pressed my palm against the hallway wall to keep my balance. I scrolled up. The messages went back exactly 2 years and 4 months. They contained hundreds of hotel receipts, mocking jokes about my weight, and a precise step-by-step plan to drain the $400,000 my late father left for my medical treatments. The smell of fresh coffee and bacon drifted up the stairs. Down in the kitchen, my husband was whistling a pop song. I walked into the guest bathroom and locked the door. I gripped the edge of the porcelain sink. The cold ceramic grounded me. I pulled my own phone from my pocket. I opened the camera. I took photos of every single message on his screen. Every bank routing number, every twisted joke. My hands shook violently. I forced them down against the counter and kept snapping photos until my storage was nearly full. Once I had everything, I wiped the burner phone clean with a hand towel. I walked back to the hallway and placed it precisely where it had fallen, nudging it just under the canvas flap of the golf bag. I walked down the stairs. My legs moved like lead blocks. He turned around from the stove and smiled at me. He handed me a plate of food. He kissed my forehead. His lips were warm. I took the plate. I smiled back. I sat at the table and took a bite of my eggs. The countdown had started. He just had no idea. I am 32 years old. And for the last 4 years, my life has been defined by a quiet, exhausting battle with an autoimmune disease. The fatigue settles into my bones like wet cement. My father, before he passed away last spring, sold his small manufacturing business and placed $400,000 into a trust specifically designated for my long-term care and experimental therapies. My husband, David, was my rock during the funeral. He held my hand. He wiped my tears. He told my family he would take care of me forever. My younger sister, Chloe, sat right next to him during the service. She cried harder than anyone. She leaned on his shoulder. I thought it was grief. I was completely blind. Sitting at the breakfast table, chewing food that tasted like ash. The puzzle pieces slammed together. David's sudden interest in managing our finances. Chloe's frequent unannounced visits. The way they both insisted I needed to rest. Volunteering to run my errands and handle the estate paperwork together. They were building a cage around me, and I had handed them the tools. Friday was 3 days away. Friday was the day David scheduled a meeting with his friend, a notary, to finalize a document he claimed would simplify my medical payouts. A document that, according to the texts, gave him full, unhindered power of attorney over my father's trust. I swallowed the last bite of my breakfast, rinsed my plate, and walked back upstairs. My reflection in the mirror looked exactly the same, but the woman looking back was entirely different. They broke my heart, but I was going to break their entire world. At 9 o'clock that morning, David left for the office. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my keys. I drove straight to the offices of Sterling and Vance, the estate attorneys my father had used before David convinced me to switch to his personal lawyer. Mr. Sterling remembered me immediately. I sat in his leather chair, pulled out my phone, and showed him the photos. I watched the color drain from his face. 1 hour later, we had a strategy. David's plan relied on a legal loophole regarding spousal consent in my current state, paired with the power of attorney he expected me to sign. To block him, I needed to completely dissolve the current trust structure and move the funds into a new, irrevocable trust under a different tax ID, naming myself as the sole beneficiary and a corporate fiduciary as the trustee. It was a nuclear option. It would lock the money down so tight that even I would have to jump through hoops to access it. But David would never touch a single dime. The paperwork took 2 days to finalize. During those 48 hours, I played the role of the tired, grateful wife flawlessly. When Chloe came over on Wednesday to bring me soup, I drank it. I listened to her talk about her new job. I smiled when she complained about being single. My stomach churned with nausea, but I kept my breathing steady. I watched her look at my husband when she thought my eyes were closed. The greed radiating off them was a physical sickness in the room. Thursday afternoon, the transfer cleared. The $400,000 was gone from the joint access holding account. It was safe. Friday evening arrived with the stifling heat of late summer. David had arranged a special family dinner at our house to celebrate the paperwork signing. He invited Chloe, my mother, and his notary friend, Marcus. He bought a $200 bottle of wine and ordered catering from my favorite Italian restaurant. The table was set with our wedding china. The irony tasted metallic in my mouth. We ate. Everyone laughed. My mother talked about how proud my father would be of David stepping up to take care of me. David placed a warm, heavy hand over mine on the tablecloth. Chloe raised her glass for a toast, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. Dessert was cleared. Marcus, the notary, cleared his throat and unzipped his leather briefcase. He pulled out a thick stack of papers with bright yellow sticky notes marking the signature lines. He slid a heavy, expensive pen across the table toward me. David leaned in close. His cologne made my eyes water. It was the same cologne he wore on the beach with my sister. I let the pen sit there. The silence in the dining room stretched tight, snapping like a rubber band. I reached under my chair and pulled up a thick manila envelope. I placed it squarely on top of David's documents. I looked directly at Marcus. I slid the envelope open. Inside were 5 perfectly bound copies of a completely different document. I handed the first one to my mother. I handed the second to Marcus. I slid the third across the table to Chloe. I placed the final copy directly in front of David. My husband frowned, opening the cover. His eyes scanned the first page. The blood vanished from his face, leaving him looking like a wax mannequin. The document on top was the irrevocable trust confirmation. The account balance on his carefully constructed power of attorney was now officially 0. But the second page was the real heavy artillery. It was a printed, high-resolution copy of the photograph from the beach, and the third page was a typed transcript of their text messages, detailing exactly how they planned to steal my father's money and leave me destitute in a care facility. Chloe gasped. The sound was sharp and panicked, like a bird flying into a glass window. My mother dropped her copy onto the table. Her hands were shaking violently. She looked from the photograph to Chloe, and then back to the photograph. David opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His jaw worked silently. He looked at Marcus, the notary, who was already shoving his own papers back into his briefcase, desperate to flee the blast radius. I stood up. My legs were perfectly steady. I looked down at the man I had married, the man who swore to protect me. The divorce papers are in the mail. I said. My voice was calm, cutting through the heavy air like a razor blade. The locks on the house were changed this morning while you were at work. Your clothes are packed in garbage bags in the garage. You have exactly 10 minutes to leave my property before the police arrive to enforce the emergency restraining order my lawyer filed at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Chloe started crying loudly, reaching across the table toward my mother. My mother stood up, pushing her chair back with a screech that echoed off the walls. She didn't look at my sister. She didn't say a word. She grabbed her purse, walked out the front door, and let it slam shut behind her. David finally found his voice. It was small, pathetic, and trembling. He tried to reach for my hand. I took a single step back. 9 minutes, I said, staring at the grandfather clock in the corner. He looked at my face, searching for a trace of the weak. Sick woman he had been manipulating for years. He found absolutely nothing. He grabbed his coat and ran. Chloe followed right behind him, sobbing into her hands. The house was completely silent. I stood alone in my dining room, surrounded by dirty plates and shattered illusions. I took a deep breath. My chest expanded fully for the first time in 4 years. The legal proceedings took 8 brutal months. David fought for alimony. He claimed he had sacrificed his career to care for me. The judge looked at the text messages, the financial records, and the blatant attempt to defraud my medical trust. The gavel came down like a hammer of pure iron. David was awarded absolutely nothing. Furthermore, the court ordered him to pay my legal fees, totaling $34,000. As a direct consequence of his fraudulent filings, the social fallout was completely devastating. Our community is small and tightly knit. The truth spreads faster than a wildfire. David was quietly asked to resign from his position at the investment firm. His reputation was scorched earth. Chloe attempted to spin a narrative of victimhood, claiming David manipulated her. Our family did not buy a single word of it. My aunts, my uncles, and my cousins entirely severed contact with her. She was forced to move to a different state, completely isolated and utterly alone. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I received a thick envelope in the mail with no return address. The postmark was from Chloe's new city. It was a long, rambling, handwritten letter, 6 pages of excuses, blame shifting, and tearful pleas for forgiveness. She wrote that she was still my sister, that blood was thicker than water, and that she did it because she felt lost and overshadowed by my illness. She begged for one more chance. I read the letter standing in my kitchen. I felt the paper under my fingertips. I felt the familiar pull of guilt. The ingrained conditioning of a lifetime of sisterhood trying to drag me back into the dark. I walked over to the garbage can. I let the pages slip from my hand, watching them tumble into the trash alongside the empty coffee filters and vegetable scraps. I did not reply. I did not shed a single tear. I made a cup of green tea and walked out onto my back porch to watch the sunrise. My life looks very different now. My health is stable, managed by a team of specialists, funded entirely by the trust my father built with his own 2 hands. My home is a sanctuary of peace. My chosen family friends who stood fiercely by my side, neighbors who checked in on me, the lawyer who became a trusted mentor fills my weekends with genuine laughter. There are no whispers behind my back. There are no shadows hiding in the corners of my marriage. If you are listening to this and you are trapped in a room with people who use your love as a weapon against you, I need you to understand 3 things. First, blood does not make you family. Loyalty, respect, and fundamental human decency make you family. DNA is simply a biological accident. It is never a lifelong obligation to endure abuse. Second, you are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, no matter how long they have been in your life. The length of a relationship does not dictate its value. Time spent being manipulated is time stolen, and you have every right to take the rest of your time back. Finally, your softness is not weakness, but your boundaries must be made of steel. They will try to use your empathy to break you. Let them try. Build your walls high, secure your own future, and let them shatter themselves against the truth. I am 33 years old. I am surviving. I am fighting for my health every single day. And for the first time in my life, I am completely, beautifully free. Let's take a deep breath. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are wondering how she could possibly sit at that breakfast table and eat her eggs after seeing those horrific text messages. Why didn't she throw her coffee right in his face? Why play along for 3 agonizing days while her husband and her own sister smiled in her face and plotted to steal her medical fund? It is incredibly easy to judge from the outside. But let us break down the psychology of what was actually happening here. Specifically, something called the slot machine effect, or intermittent reinforcement. When you are battling a chronic illness, your world gets very small, and you become deeply vulnerable. Toxic people know this. They do not abuse you 100% of the time. If they did, you would leave immediately. Instead, they give you just enough affection to keep you hooked. David holding her hand at the funeral, Chloe coming over to bring her soup, those were the jackpot payouts on the slot machine. Her brain became conditioned to survive on those tiny crumbs of hope and safety. She was not stupid for staying in the dark. She was surviving. But the moment she saw the cold, hard proof on that burner phone, the slot machine broke. And that is when she executed an absolute masterclass in financial self-defense. Most people blow everything up on day one. They scream, they cry, and they show the enemy their hand. But our protagonist used 3 street-smart strategies that saved her life. First, building the case. She did not just confront him about the affair. She locked herself in the bathroom and photographed the routing numbers, the bank details, and the step-by-step texts. Scammers hate details. They rely on your emotional reaction to distract you from the money. She ignored the emotion and secured the data. Second, the audit strategy. Instead of using David's handpicked lawyer, she went straight back to her father's original estate attorney to verify the exact legal loophole David was trying to exploit. The lesson here is simple: never take legal, financial, or life advice from the person who benefits from your downfall. Third, the buyout. She moved all $400,000 into an irrevocable trust with a corporate fiduciary. She essentially locked her own money in an impenetrable vault. Yes, it made accessing the funds harder for her. But she recognized that true freedom comes with a cost. By locking down the assets, she completely starved the parasites. She invested in her ultimate independence, and because her paper trail was so flawless, the court forced him to eat the $34,000 in legal fees. Now, when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I hear is not David moving quietly through the hallway, pretending to be devoted while calculating how much of my father's money he could steal. It is the soft click of the kettle in the kitchen. It is the wind brushing against the porch screens. It is my own breathing. Slow, steady, and completely mine. That may not sound like victory to some people, but to me, it is everything. For years, my illness made me feel like my body had become a battlefield I could never leave. Every appointment, Every flare-up, every new treatment plan reminded me that stability was fragile. Then David and Chloe looked at that fragility and saw opportunity. They saw a woman they thought was too tired to fight, too sick to question, too emotionally dependent to notice the cage being built around her. They were wrong. My father's trust still exists. It is protected, locked down, and used exactly the way he intended. Every specialist visit, every infusion, every day I get to wake up with a little more strength is funded by the last act of love my father left behind. David never understood that kind of love. To him, care was a costume. Devotion was a performance. Marriage was not a vow, it was access. And Chloe taught me that betrayal does not always arrive from a stranger. Sometimes it uses your childhood nickname. Sometimes it brings soup. Sometimes it sits across from you at dinner, smiling with the same face you grew up trusting, while secretly planning how to profit from your collapse. That was the part that almost broke me. Not the affair. Not even the money. It was realizing that they had rehearsed my ruin in private, then kissed my forehead in public. For a long time, I wondered how they could do it. How David could stand beside me at my father's funeral and promise to protect me, knowing he was already measuring the value of my vulnerability. How Chloe could cry into tissues, lean on my husband's shoulder, and then help him design a plan to leave me medically helpless and financially trapped. But healing begins when you stop demanding human answers from people who behaved without humanity. So I stopped asking why. I started asking what now? What now became changing the locks? What now became trusting the lawyers my father trusted? What now became moving the money before the parasites could touch it? What now became sitting at my own dining table, looking at the man who thought he owned my future, and calmly telling him he had 9 minutes to leave. People imagine strength as shouting, but real strength, the kind you build after betrayal, is quieter than that. It is eating breakfast while your hands shake because you know your rage cannot be allowed to warn the enemy. It is smiling through dinner because the paperwork is already complete. It is choosing not to collapse in front of people who were waiting to use your pain as evidence against you. The divorce did not just end my marriage. It returned my life to me. David lost the money, the house, the reputation, and the false image of the heroic husband. Chloe lost the family she thought would excuse her because she could cry louder than she could tell the truth. And I lost the final illusion that love and access are the same thing. They are not. Love protects. Access must be earned. That is why I threw Chloe's letter away. Not because I felt nothing about the sister I once had, but because the sister I once had would never have helped a man steal the money keeping me alive. The woman who wrote that letter was not asking for forgiveness. She was asking for a doorway. And I had finally learned that some doors are not meant to be reopened. My home is peaceful now. My treatments continue. Some days are still hard. My body still has limits. And I still wake up some mornings with pain sitting heavy in my bones. But there is no longer a second sickness living under my roof. No manipulation. No hidden phone. No whispered plans. No person touching my hand while secretly reaching for my wallet. That kind of peace is medicine too. So if you are listening to this while trapped beside someone who uses your weakness against you, please hear me clearly. Your vulnerability is not their invitation. Your illness is not their opportunity. Your love is not a blank check. And your loyalty does not require you to finance your own destruction. Sometimes saving yourself will look cold to the people who benefited from your warmth. Let it. Sometimes protecting your future will make you the villain in the story they tell. Let them tell it. You do not need to win their version of events. You need to survive the truth of what they did. My name is not a signature on someone else's escape plan. My father's money is not a prize for betrayal. My body is not a weakness to exploit. My home is not a stage for fake devotion. And my future is no longer negotiable. I am 33 years old. I am still healing. I am still fighting for my health. I am still learning what safety feels like after years of mistaking performance for love. But I am here. The trust is safe. The locks are changed. The letters go unanswered. And every breath I take now belongs only to me. The ultimate verdict here is about your fundamental self-worth. Manipulators will always try to weaponize your vulnerabilities against you, whether it is your health, your bank account, or your love for your family. But your boundaries must remain absolute steel. Walking away from them was not just a divorce, it was a rescue mission for her own life. Have you ever had to walk away from a family member or a partner to protect your peace and your future? Drop your story in the comments below. This community reads every single one. And if this breakdown gave you a new perspective on protecting yourself, hit that subscribe button. Stay safe, stay smart, and never apologize for defending your life.